one of the things that really was common between all these team members and me was we were really worried about people that we love, they were worried about the family they had back home. I was worried about my family and other people. We're trying to see a better world that the people that we love can live in. So it just comes to that, if you've seen some, and it doesn't only have to be a parent, it can be somebody that you can relate to and you feel like they're being a part of injustice, or like the world is not being really nice to them. I think that is what that passionate what fuels you, and you're like, okay, this is something that I need to take leadership in, and I need to deliver change in that sector. So for me, it's basically about that, and I live with that philosophy, and I think I'll live it for very long. Is like, okay, if I am being able to empathize with you and I feel like you're not the world is not being just to you, I feel like that's my responsibility, because as you already mentioned, what I am today is part of everybody giving in and everybody contributing to the society. So it's my responsibility. It's not me doing a favor to anyone, but it's my responsibility to come in action and say, hey, this is what actually should be happening.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Pamonsu, and our goal and mission with this show is to introduce you to stories of young people across the globe who we believe are the next generation of thought leaders in their respective fields. Additionally, we aim to share with you ideas and concepts that you can implement to elevate both your business and personal life. Right, as you know, my friends, I'm quite excited for this next guest on the podcast. As you know, my friends, we're always looking for young movers and shakers who are impacting the lives of those in their communities and the world at large. She's well known for ability to execute and lead diverse teams towards their desired goal, which I really think is quite a testament to a body of work, as she's executed from running fundraisers to buying life-saving oxygen during the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, she's been at the forefront of leading a movement of what we now know as the Davis Peace Project that taught students from both Nepal and China, I believe, about the importance of air pollution in our time. She sounds to me like a jack of all trades, coined of her ability to master all that which she does. And lastly, she is a global scholar at Babson College, where she's studying towards her degrees in global business management and economics here in Boston, Massachusetts. On that note, without any further ado, join me in welcoming the Executive Director of the Innovating Environmental Health in both Nepal, Bidhi Mandal. Bidhi, thank you so much for joining us here at the Leaders Podcast.
Thank you, Ombo. It's such a pleasure to be a part of this podcast. Just being able to be in a group of people who think like young people have the authority and power to change the world, and young people from diverse communities and from around the world have that power. I think this podcast does an amazing job of putting them together and just inspiring people around the globe. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much, Pete. It is indeed a pleasure. I know we've spoken a lot prior to this actually having you on the podcast. And I think before we even delve into the body of work and what you've done, I know there's a lot to talk about. And my hope is that we can all, touch the very important touch points about your story. But I think I'm interested, talking about how you've been, just curious about how you've been recently, what's been on your mind, and how you've been navigating these trying times.
Yeah, so right now I am just a little bit busy with schoolwork and just trying to understand entrepreneurship ecosystem around different places. So yesterday I had to go to an event where there were entrepreneurs from 8 different schools and everybody was pitching their idea, and I was just it just really got me thinking about the power that entrepreneurship holds. And it's when you're at Babson College, which takes entrepreneurship very seriously, you sometimes end up undermining. You're like, okay, entrepreneurship is there, but at the same time, when I got to meet all these people from these different schools, and everybody is working. Some people were working on improving the relationship between the parents and children. Some people were working on electric vehicles. Some people were working on air quality sensors. And I'm like, wow, the amount of power that entrepreneurship holds to like empower different elements just to solve all these problems. I think the next wave of change will come through entrepreneurship, and just been thinking on that, like just like thinking about it, and it has given me like a lot of it was a sense of comfort, because I think like I am learning entrepreneurship, and I feel like I have in reach the power that is actually going to change the world, and that is like really nice to realize. So it's just been like amazing to understand what all these people have been trying to do.
I think it's quite interesting that you mentioned that, because when you look at some of the change makers at the forefront of innovation or technological development or advancement currently, you look at like your Elon Musk, your Jeff, those are entrepreneurs, who've chosen a path to really do something that is so radical. So I think it's interesting that you think about that. I often think about, and I know we've spoken about this, but being in spaces that do speak the language of your path, you know what I'm saying? Where you're around young people who get you thinking, who realize that in many ways you're on the right path, but in many ways you don't know what you don't know. Which is a beautiful intersection to be. I think testament to what you said, as a space like Babson College was such a huge startup culture and a lot of young people interested, a lot of interesting stuff. It's just a beautiful time to be alive, where you are reminded of just the unlimited possibilities that we can all achieve as entrepreneurs in our own ways. So quite excited I think to see if this is your first year or your first semester on campus, to see what this semester's coming up would look like for you. Now, Bidhi, for context, I know for sure I've spoken to you and understand some of your background, but I think to our listeners, individuals who've never encountered your name, encountered your body of work, what you stand for, what you promote, for context, I think walk us through, a series of events or personal events, that led you to want to have the desire and the impact that you want to have in Nepal thus far.
Yeah. So I come from the capital city of Nepal, which though it has been really lacking in like development. We have been facing things, and I come from like low income family within the city. So my childhood, just to give you in context, because I believe childhood of any person really impacts what they end up becoming. So while I was growing up, I was really struggling even for the basic needs. So my parents, my mom is a daily wage worker. My father, he actually had to leave his job due to some health concerns. So we were really like, I was really growing up in this scarcity where I was like, like struggling to get daily water. Like there's no access to water to your house. You're struggling to get nutritious food, and education was also like very hard to get. But my mom, I don't know, she was really courageous enough to say, okay, education is something that my daughter needs, and like it'll change her life. And she was able to put me through a very good school, and that has brought a lot of change that you see in me. But growing up, I always thought about, okay, why is it that I mean, if I see you as a person, if I see me as a person, we are both human beings, right? But why are you being able to have all the luxuries, or why do you have a better life than me? I always had that question when I would see people around me, my classmates, and I was like, okay, am I not good enough to have a good life as you were having? So that really got me in the question of inequality. And the more I thought about it, even the basic things that I talked to you about, like water, air, food, these things are not accessible to people who come from low-income families. And I think that's really sad, because those are provided by nature, right? So how is it like we all have been born in the same world, but at the same time, I'm not get access to like clean water, sanitation, or like clean air? And that really got me thinking. I was really upset, and I was like, okay, I need to do something towards equality, and just income equality and economic equality. Then the idea of entrepreneurship comes in play. And I'm like, and I see these people and everybody. Basically, entrepreneurship is giving somebody this empowerment. So it's very much about empowerment for me, and not about starting a business or starting a project. It's about taking leadership of the problem that you're facing. It's about you saying, hey, okay, this is what I'm suffering from, or this is what is like not letting me have a good life. Let me go beyond this and change it. So it really gives people who are actually suffering from this problem an idea of you have to be the change maker. So that I thought that was super interesting. So I started exploring that, and then I got involved in a lot of organization, got to learn about entrepreneurship more, and then there's this organization that I'm currently leading. It's called Innovating Environmental Health. I actually joined it as communications intern. So it's really interesting how I've grown through this organization, but we are actually making cleaner accessible to all these people who come from low resource communities.
Yeah. It's interesting, Bidhi, how you took a personal experience. And I think in many ways, that's what often kills people. And not even kills me, but kills that desire, that inner desire, or the inner belief. It's interesting how even amidst all of that, you kept the faith. You know what I'm saying? When I listen to how you used that, the one thing that the world would look down at you upon, as you use that as a tool to spur the change that you've had. And that's something I've always really kind of admired about you. Well, and also in preparation for your episode, reading about various articles that have been published about you and what you've done. And it gets me also thinking about this idea that in many ways, despite where you're born or the privilege that you're born onto, we all matter and we all have a role to play. And I think that role can only make a difference, if we take the responsibility to own our lives and show respect to those we love, those around us, and just all living things, So, yeah, I think when I think about you and I think about what you stand for, and I think about exactly what you just told about, the backstories and how you've coined it, your life is a true embodiment of that. Somebody who, you could safely say somebody who at the young age, the world, according to their standards, would have given up hopes on, right? But out of that, as spurred this individual who's in front of me today. And I think when I think about that, having spent time looking throughout your body of work, Bidhi, I became aware. There was one article I was reading about how your organization also, I believe there's a pillar in your organization where you provide a co-ed curriculum to 150 students, I believe, in the region of Nepal, which is based on your commitment towards STEM learning. And I found that quite peculiar because I was like, okay, what is it about STEM learning, that you felt was so important to be a co-component to promote in your organization?
Yeah, so this curriculum that we are teaching right now, it has both STEM and entrepreneurship.
Yes.
So basically what you're doing is like you're saying, hey, these are the tools that you can use. So there's components of design thinking, there's components of electrical engineering, there's components of like so many different things that is kind of a requirement, but at the same time, there is this idea where you can come out of the problem and think like, okay, this is a problem that I can take leadership of. Yeah. So when you're going into these areas that have like worst air pollution, where people, like I remember, so I think this is a fact that I should mention, like Kathmandu recently was mentioned, the city was the worst air pollution in the entire world. So if you sometimes walk around and if you just see smogs, like it's like it just gets really bad, and like the schools are operating in that system, so young children are going to school, old people are walking here and there, and it's not good. It's there, something should be done about it. But at the same time, when you're seeing interventions, when all these different donor agencies are coming, they're seeing the problem from like very outside. You don't know what's really happening. You don't know how it is impacting. Of course, there might be data. Of course, there might be understanding of the industry, of the market. But at the same time, the passion is not there. It's not impacting your family. It's not impacting your personal lives. So we were like, what if we like empower them with all this data, all this technology that can actually solve air pollution, and give them to people who are actually passionate about it, the problem, who's like the people who are actually impacted by the problem. So this curriculum is basically being able to give them tools to
Yeah.
people who actually suffer from those problems, and giving them that mindset saying, hey, guess what, it's your problem and you can actually change the situation that you're living in.
Mhm. And then what are some of the, to walk me through some of that, because I'm really interested in some of the like impact stories, and I believe, okay, for confidential, you don't have to name names, but some of the ways in which this has impacted the communities that you've touched, if there's
Yeah.
anything off the top of your head.
Yeah. So we had actually a girl who actually lived around a factory that made like clothes and like it clothes and tires, and like it was around the industrial area, and she was living there, and she would talk about how there was like a lot of smoke and it was like impacting her life and things like that. So this was this person who was actually talking about these problems in the beginning of the course, and by the end of the course she was able to say, okay, this technology might be used to like solve this, and she was actually able to see how these like industries are working, what is it that the problem. So she was able to narrow it down to, okay, there's a need and change in the constitution, so like the laws should be stricter. So she was actually able to like advocate for that. She was actually able to say, okay, these are the technologies that can actually help improve the smoke that is being released in the community. So I think like since we just started, there has not been like a lot of changes in the community because it's a very complex problem. But if we're seeing this individual changes, and I think it can also be counted as a community change, that this person is coming from, okay, this problem is impacting me, to saying, hey, this is how it can be tackled. This is what it needs to be done to do this. And like, I think we need more of that happening. So like, okay, even if you're like advocating, one of the problem that we see with like air pollution is like, it basically takes your lungs capacity really slowly. So it doesn't like, okay, you breathe some smoky air and you don't like, it doesn't impact you right away, but it's like a very slow process. So these people think like air pollution is not a very big problem, and you see that everywhere. Even if you're going to talk to some government personnel, they're like, okay, air pollution is something that we're not willing to focus into. So even being able to start this conversation and saying, okay, this is what science is saying and this is what we need to work on, has really brought people into that mindset. Okay, this is something that we really need to tackle on, because air pollution in Nepal is killing more people than the COVID ever killed, but COVID got so much attention, right? Like so many people started talking about COVID. There were so many interventions, like government bodies started working. We had hospitals set up in a matter of like 1 or 2 weeks, and like there was so much work happening. And I think it's same with air pollution and climate change. Like it's a major problem to human existence, and we are not doing anything about it. And I think we need to have more conversations in that space.
As many of you know, the podcast is all about documenting and curating stories of active change makers we believe are the next generation of thought leaders in their respective fields. Which is why I'm excited to tell you about our friends at Function Photography and Brand Development Services. They are a for-profit that exists to serve and create meaningful experiences for brands with a cause and individuals with a sense of purpose. They've worked alongside some of the biggest brand and media personalities, including but not limited to members such as Tabzi and the famous Candice Mudisel. Therefore, my friends, if you're looking for an affordable photography, videography or brand development services, make sure that you check out our friends at Function Photography and Brand Development Services. Make sure to click the link below for more information. Thank you.
And I think just while I was listening to you, one thing I'm also interested in when you talk about air pollution is that I'm guessing at the time in which you stood up against and just brought attention to this topic, I'm guessing there are individuals, industry giants, corporate corporate individuals who have obviously just care about the bottom line. So I'm interested in were there any form of resistance that you faced from big companies or threats, that you encountered with your team as you were trying to bring attention to the importance of air pollution and what other corporate giants in certain regions of Nepal were talking about?
Yeah. So one of the big problem that you face while working in these sort of issues is like the companies that actually are like producing all these smokes. So one of the main problem smokes and so one of the main producers of like smoke in Kathmandu are Bricklands. So they actually also empower a lot of children, like sorry, not empower. They actually like employ a lot of children, which is like not legal, but at the same and a lot of women and they work like it's not a good working environment. You see these small children carrying bricks, and it's not a very good thing happening in the cities, and they also are contributing really badly to air pollution. But at the same time, the way they're integrated in the system are like they're part of like major political parties. They're like, you know, funding so many events, they're like sponsoring so many parties, and it's really sad to see that happening, because whenever you're trying to like work towards it, you see like, okay, these people are in the government as well, like business and government, like it's not a good way of to do business, but at the same time the profit that they make, they're trying to use it towards the government, and it really like brings things together. And yeah, it's just like really difficult to bring change in that matter.
I can imagine. You know, I think of this idea, this African proverb called Ubuntu, which is this idea that I am because we are, right? So when I think about you, and I think about the impact, like when I was tracking back to that impact story and the importance of air pollution, I think about how in many ways you've accomplished so much, but there is a part of you that is so driven to serve, right? This idea that yes, you understand that you are where you are because of individuals who in their own ways have paid it forward for you to have access to the opportunities that you've had. That even after reaching this far, a huge part of you is like, I need to go back and then give back to those who've sacrificed for me, which really, you know, stands out for me, just listening to why this topic is important to you, to some of the impact stories, you know, this idea of a communal upbringing. So I think, given all that you've accomplished, and I know you mentioned this a bit, that you're not all about entrepreneurship for the sake of just entrepreneurship, but also there's this idea of impact and empowerment. Talk to me about what impact means to you, you know.
Yeah, so if we are looking at a very personal level, for me, whenever I talk about impact, yes, I want to create a better world. But why do I want to create a better world? So there are like two levels. First level is because, you know, the world that I live in has people I love. So there's my mom, there's my dad. So yes, whenever I'm talking about making this world a better place, actually this also goes on a very personal level. I want my family, I want people I love to be in a better space, you know, because I feel like whenever I'm trying to like tackle something, I go on a personal level and see like how this impacts communities and families. So it's just like whenever I'm like, there are, if of course on a business level there are numerous ways to like measure impact. You're seeing what's changing, what's not changing. But if I talk about how I see impact, then it's just like, okay, I need to create a better world where my mom can thrive, where my father can thrive, where I can thrive as a person. And just giving people the same playing ground. So if I'm coming from this community, I should not be held back, you know. Everybody should have this, like if I'm born into this world, I should be able to have this ability to live my life to the fullest, no matter what it means for me. But I should be able to say, okay, if I want the education in a good university, it should not hold a student from a low income family back. You know? Like, I just feel like if I'm thinking of this world as like a perfect place, then it would just be able to give everybody equal access to opportunities so they can live their life in the way they want to. So just trying to create that in a very small way.
Wow. And I think which is speaks to the idea of how important access can be, like access to resources, exposure in general. You know, if you can see, it kind of goes back to this quote that you cannot dream that which you've not seen, right? So if the mind is...
Sorry to interrupt you, but it just reminded me of some things. I was actually talking to this group of people, and they were talking about how they come from this rural part of the community in Nepal, and they were just talking about And one of them is actually working at, like, he got a lot of access, and he is actually working at Harvard Business School right now. And we actually led this COVID work that we did in Nepal. And he was just talking about, we just happened to end up talking about things, and he was talking about, when I go to my village, I just see all these children, and I just think about the potential that they can achieve, but they're not but they're not exposed to ideas. They don't know that they're able to, like, get this education, so they never dream about it. So it was like, oh, it was so heartbreaking, because, like, you don't know what's in there for you in this whole world, the potential that you can reach. And I think, as you already just, the thing that you mentioned really got me thinking, like, you really need to be exposed to things to be able to dream about it. And if you don't dream about it, you don't achieve it. So there is a cycle that you need to follow. So it really starts with exposure. You need to see people doing things. You need to know that there is this in this world for you, and then you achieve it. And it really starts with exposure.
I love it. And simple, if you can conceive it, if your mind can conceive it and then really imagine it, like it's possible. I love that. Wow, that was actually quite interesting. Now, this part really got me thinking. In fact, it really blew my mind away. I was like, wow, this is interesting. They actually did this. I want us to talk about the Davis Peace Project. So I know you and your team worked alongside with some professors from Nepal College to validate the technology used to mold the air filtration system. Now, I was like, oh, this is actually quite interesting. Now, I'm interested in, like, through that process, the design process, right? What were some of the loopholes or the loops that you guys had to jump through, to fully certify that this is something you can provide to people in Nepal? I was actually interested in the design process that you guys went through.
Yeah, so the design process that we were going through, okay, so air pollution is actually impacting a lot of like countries. Like, we cannot say, since we're in a developing countries, it's not impacting us. Actually, the professor from Olin College, Scott Hersey, he actually is working in Boston area. So right next around, like, the airport, there's this community of people, and they live in this area that has, like, really high air pollution. So this professor was already working on, like, an air filtration device, and actually you can take a class that can get you engaged in this project. And we were trying to do a similar work. So we just reached out to him, and we're like, okay, this is what we think can be done, and this is what we would like to do. And, like, we really got thinking, and we also got involved with, like, a professor from Kathmandu University. So back home, we had, like, professors who were actually seeing problems on like day-to-day basis. They're actually, like, interacting in Nepal. So we also got them involved. We had, like, students who were a part of it from the Kathmandu University. So it was, like, a very collective process. So, like, one of the things I have been, like, emphasizing from the beginning of this interview is, like, whenever you're like trying to bring change in a community or trying to provide change in a community, it really starts with people who are there. So it's more about, like, bringing them alongside the design process. So I think that is a very key component of what we do, is, like, whatever we're trying to design, be it EcoEd, be it, like, this air filtration device, it is, like, about bringing people who actually will be using it. And in every step of the process, not when you're, like, done with the device and go and say, like, okay, we have installed it, if you have some problem, let us know, but in the design process itself. And that has, like, led into changing the air filter in so many ways. So that was really exciting to see.
It is so beautiful how, the world is just a village, how you were, if I remember, you were back home while all of this is happening, right? Leading a team through this process, having to, I'm guessing, also learning on the job, like learning what they're actually doing, so that you can speak the language of the profession, just so that you can really understand what the product does. And then, so I think it's quite interesting. And it really got me thinking about, I was thinking, and I think this is a great segue into our last segment of the episode. I think about, it's great of the impact that you've done, but I also think about you as a person, as Bidhi, where you are. Talk to me about some of the challenges you encountered in leading virtual teams, and how you overcame them, like how what in simple terms, you kind of the man in the arena, the steering of your own story, right? We all have an audience perspective through that which you're doing right now. right? But none of us can, I guess, really fully understand what it takes to be you, or what it takes to be at the center of your story. So I was actually quite interested in that, and how you keep yourself, keep yourself sane, do some self-care. How do you do what you do? In simple terms.
That's a very interesting and a very difficult question to answer, but I'll give it a shot. So, so when the first wave of COVID hit, both my father and I got infected. So like we both were COVID positive, and it was when I was back home. And it was like it was at the top of the surge. So like all the hospitals were booked, and only the private ones were open, which were like super expensive, and we couldn't. And I was just trying to get I was not very serious, but my father got really serious. He would get like very high fevers at night, and it just got super scary for us as a family. So we were trying to get him admitted to a government hospital, and it didn't work. Like, they were like super packed, and they couldn't take any people, and like it just seemed, even in those conditions, healthcare was not accessible to us. But luckily, even like treating him at home, like I was super like taking care of him, just trying to follow. It was strange because I was trying to Google how to take care of my father, when at times I felt like he would not like live through this, and it was super difficult for me to see that, and just taking care of him. And my father is basically my guardian, he's like taken care of me since I was a child, and like to see somebody who has actually taken care of you in that stage is really difficult. But luckily nothing really bad happened. He was able to recover, and I was also able to recover. He got super weak, but at the same time he recovered, and things went back to normal. But when the second wave of COVID was about to hit Nepal, I got super anxious. Like I was actually finishing my school, like first year at Babson. I took both of it online, and like I was actually like the second wave was coming, and I was like the India was being impacted by it. There was like oxygen shortages and things that like happening, and it was really getting bad in India, and I was like super scared for my family and people who lived around me. I was like, okay, this is something that I really need to like work into, because the government is not prepared, things are not happening. So I just wrote a casual post on Facebook saying, hey, where's the diaspora community? We need to do something about Nepal. This is not working. And that Facebook post in a week led to 40 students from 40 universities around the Nepal. So all of them were Nepali people, and they came from like 40 universities around the world. We made a team. We don't know how, but in a week we raised around 25,000 US dollars. We bought in oxygen cylinders, we bought in testing kits, and we started supplying. And we were like, okay, this is something that happened. And I think we were one of the very initial fundraisers that actually took place in Nepal, and that followed with so many others. So like then celebrities started to come and play, and other people started, like businessmen, they started raising money. So like we were the very first to begin. And most of these people that I worked with on this project, I had never met. So like, all of these like people I've never met, never heard from, we actually came on a Facebook chat, and everybody like, okay, I'm making the website. Someone like, I'm making the fundraiser. Someone's like, I'm like making a bank account. Someone like, I'm like depositing the money. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Like it just took off, like in a week, the team that I was able to create, and it was around like 200 people, and we were reaching to more than 25 universities in the US and around the world. And it was like so amazing to see this power. And I think one of the things that really was common between all these team members and me was we were really worried about people that we love. They were worried about the family they had back home. I was worried about my family and other people. So I think I had to like explain all this to come to a point, is that whatever we do is like we do to create, like as I already mentioned, we're trying to see a better world that the people that we love can live in. So it just comes to that, if you've seen some, and it doesn't only have to be a parent, it can be somebody that you can relate to, and you feel like they're being a part of injustice, or like the world is not being really nice to them. I think that is what that passionate what fuels you, and you're like, okay, this is something that I need to take like leadership in, and I need to like deliver change in that sector. So for me, it's basically about that, and I live with that philosophy, and I think I'll live it for very long. Is like, okay, if I am being able to empathize with you, and I feel like you're not the world is not being just to you, I feel like that's my responsibility, because like as you already mentioned, what I am today is part of like everybody giving in and everybody contributing to the society. So it's my responsibility. It's not me doing a favor to anyone, but it's my responsibility to come in action and say, hey, this is what actually should be happening. So it's just what I do, and the way I do is just to keep myself motivated and passionate with the idea that the world that they live in should be as good as somebody else does, and just it's just happening in that way. Yeah.
And as a derivative of that, you talked about keeping yourself motivated and stuff. I just want to delve a lot more into that, so that people who might be listening to really understand what they can do in their own way, practical steps. I believe everybody is probably committed to something that is equally as hard, like choose a task that's bigger than themselves. But I think the principles through which we live our life, individuals who've often done similar work to achieve, and the principles are kind of the same, right? It's very principles based. Might be manifested differently, but the underlying principles of what it takes to keep yourself motivated, what it takes to keep yourself committed to your commitments, it's kind of the same. So I'm quite interested, from your end, to listeners who might be listening, be thinking, okay, this girl is really great. She's done quite a lot, and I love the way what she's done. Now, I want to understand, how do I stay committed to that which I said? Might not be the same as what BD is all about, but myself, you know what I'm saying? So just into some of the ways. Do you do some affirmations? What keeps you motivated? I know you spoke about the personal experience that you had growing up, which I think coins everything going forward. But when you get those hard knocks, throughout the week, what is it that really, or how do you realign yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because like whenever you're trying to do something that's bigger than you, it's really difficult, because like you see challenges on a completely different level. Like it's super difficult. So I think one of the things that has really kept me going is to really understand who I am. So this idea of going back and looking at your roots, like, okay, this is where I come from, and this is what, because one of the things that I felt coming to a big school like Babson is like, there are so many people from so many different communities with like different backgrounds, and it gets really intimidating, and you're like, okay, am I doing the right thing, or should I be doing that, or should I not be doing this? There are so many questions that's come in play, and I think it'll come in, that'll keep on happening no matter where I go, because like there's so much diversity in the world. But at the same time, I feel like if you go back and look at your roots, like where you come from, what does it mean to be you? So like it's really starts like, go into yourself and ask like, who am I? What do I represent in this world, and where I come from? And that really gives you this power. And it's like, goes to an idea of like sticking to your roots, but at the same time touching the sky, like you don't like worry about things. So basically, but at the same time, I feel like one of the things I feel like, as the world is getting into this idea, like where so many things are merging, we tend to like, the idea of identity really gets blurred. Like there are so many ways that I can see myself, but at the same time, when I feel like, when you really go back and understand who you are and what you want to identify yourself with, and sticking to that identity really helps you understand what your role in this world is, and you can really achieve that.
And I think what I love about that is that it gets me thinking that of a quote that says that a man's function is to live and not to exist, right? And this idea that part of living, a huge part of it is living your best life, but also a life that is tied to something bigger than yourself. This idea of living with legacy in mind, to understand that my actions do impact me right now, but in many ways they are impacted to the people that are connected to you, the communities to come, or generations of your own children's children to come, So I think to tie it up, if you were to look at all that you've done and all the hoops that you've went through, and that where you're going, what you want for yourself, what you want for your organization, what you want for Nepal, the world at large, what would you say is your message to the world?
Yeah. I think this is a message to the world would be really this idea that like this realizing that your life or the problems or the things that are impacting you, it's basically you can take charge of that. I think this is something that like is not really talked about in like schools, and like people really teach you in schools and in like industries to really live towards like how system is performing, and you are really taught to like live in that system and within boundaries. But at the same time, I feel like if we are able to teach people that they can take charge of their life, if I say like if I'm doing this work but I really enjoy doing something else, you have all capacity in your life to be that person you want to be. I think that is the greatest message that anybody can actually have, because like just think about, if I think about myself, in like 5 years ago, I was somebody who didn't know what, like who was really afraid to like reach out to do things, and didn't know if I had the capacity to become the person I wanted to be. And if I had that understanding that if I just like choose a path, and there is this saying that if you ever want to like achieve something, and if you really want to do that, and if you wish to do that from whole of your heart, the whole universe tries to give you that. So just having that understanding that if you really want to like change something and become someone, you really can do that. That notion and that level of empowerment really helps people change their lives and take charge, like, okay, this is something that I really want to be, and you really end up becoming that, and you see yourself and you reflect, oh my god, did I just do that? And that's really easy to have.
Yeah. The beauty of what Paulo Coelho, who's an author, wrote the book The Alchemist, speaks about how all the elements of the universe do conspire behind man. I don't know if you've read the book.
Yes.
Oh yeah. No, he's a great author. When you said that's where my mind went. It's beautiful. Right. On that note, how can our listeners and viewers stay in touch with what you're doing?
So I actually am super active on my LinkedIn. So just my name on LinkedIn. I tend to like post about the work that I've been doing, and I think it's just a great way to connect professionally. But yeah, on Instagram maybe as well. I don't have one.
Slide in your DMs.
Yeah.
All right. Great. There you have it from Bidhi, guys. Guys, go read and look what she's about on all those social media pages. We will make sure that we share most of the links on our pages when we do release her episode. Quite excited to share this. Once again, here at the Leaders Podcast, we believe that as more and more young people grow conscious of their unique purpose, as they discover their hidden pearl, they essentially add value to society in the only way they can. Please remember to follow us on our YouTube, Instagram, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. If you enjoyed Bidhi's voice, you can also follow us on Spotify at The Leaders Podcast. Click the link below. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share with at least 3 people who you believe will find this episode valuable. Until next time, Asante Sana.